Today's video is sponsored by Native Sons Goods, makers of premium quality guitar, bag, and camera straps, handmade in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Check out their website to order your own custom creation and play in style. And remember, when you support my sponsors, you support this channel, and I sure appreciate it.
They got stuff that'll whack your brain permanently.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Brad the Guitologist here. I've got a lot of stuff lined up, ready to be fixed. You can see a lot of stuff in the line here. I've got so many different things. There's about 20 different amps, I think, at last count, that I'm going to be going through at some point. I've even got a little radio right here. So a guy wanted me to try to convert it to an amplifier. I kind of reluctantly said yes on that, so I'm held to it. So, but we've got a lot of stuff coming up, man. We've got Marshalls. I've got a Ampeg up here. I've got, I forget what's in all the boxes exactly, but I've got a lot of cool stuff coming up. I've got another Marshall down there, a vintage one. This one's actually a clone. I've also got a cool amp sitting there, which belongs to a celebrity of sorts, which is going to be pretty cool when we eventually get to that. But yeah, I've got a lot of stuff coming up, and I'm just now able to try to get to this stuff. This room is an absolute disaster, so I'm getting back in here for the kind of the first time working in a little bit. My wife has been... she's been working on her master's thesis, I don't know, past 2 or 3 months real heavily, so I haven't been able to do a whole lot. I've been watching the kids and letting her focus on just that. So yeah, I'm finally back in here, and today we're going to check out this thing. This is I think this is very late 70s, maybe even around 1980. I don't know exactly the date, but I do know that the Fender... the made in the USA on these Fender logos didn't come till kind of late in the Silverface run, so this is going to be probably late 70s. And also it has a push-pull here for volume boost. So this is from probably somewhere between 1977 and 1980, I would have to guess. But this is a Vibrolux Reverb. 2 10-inch speakers, 2 channels, the vibrato channel, of course, normal channel as well. This does have, well, vibrato. It has tremolo, speed and intensity. It also has reverb on this model. It should be a fun one. We're gonna take a look at it and see what needs to be done. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, stick around. Okay, so here's the rear of this amp. The speakers have been changed. That's the first thing I noticed right off the bat. We do have the foot switch, which is not original. This is a Mexican replacement foot switch, but it do the job. The tubes have been replaced at some stage, so they're not original. Tube depot stickers on those tubes. I'm gonna go ahead and guess the rest of them have probably also been replaced. We have a sticker here for Uncle Sam's Jams, which was a local service center that was in business for quite a while there, but they have since gone out of business. Foot switch selectable boost, which again, that's something that came on later run amplifiers for the Fender line. Foot switchable reverb and vibrato. There's our reverb in and outs. This is original, but this has been spliced, so I don't know what's happened there. I guess maybe they replaced the speaker wire when they replaced the speakers, perhaps. On-off switch, fuse. There we have a ground switch as well. I don't know the status of the grounding switch or any of that stuff. It looks like we do have a 3-prong, so that work has been done. 5U4 on the rectifier, it's original rectifier. I wonder if they've replaced that with a GZ34. Am I going to be able to see it? No, it's a 5U4 still. Electro-harmonics. Okay, but it has been replaced. That tells me that probably the rest of these have been replaced as well, because usually, I mean, usually rectifiers, they last quite a long time. I wouldn't have thought the original rectifier would have been weak or anything on this, because most of, 5U4 is a pretty robust tube. If you see a tube amp with a replaced 5U4, then usually the rest of the tubes are going to be replaced as well. A lot of repair centers are going to just tell customers, hey, you need to replace all your tubes, and that can either be correct or incorrect. A lot of times that you don't have to replace all your tubes. It's just something that they'll do to try to sell you more tubes, and when half of the tubes might have still been okay. But anyway, that's beside the point. There's the amp. We're going to open it up, see what's up with it, see what needs to be done. First, we might just plug it in and see what it's doing, and then go from there. Before we do anything also, I want to check the fuse. Let's see, fuse is a 2 amp, and that's what it calls for. That's that switch right there, that standby switch, is a little bit loose. I'm going to have to remember that. Something sounds like it's rattling. Kinda. Just from having power applied. That might be tube related. Oh, spider. I wouldn't have thought I'd get a spider in February, but I've got a set of spider on me. It probably came out of the amp. Alright, we're up to full 118 volts, 88 watts, sitting about where I would expect this thing to sit. I don't see anything out of the ordinary about that. Reverb works. Or at least the return works. Pots need to be cleaned. So far so good. Woo. It's got some heat on it. Well, crap, man. I'll be honest. I can't find any fault with this right now, except maybe some dirty pots. I don't know if this is a situation where he just wanted me to check it and see that it's, you know, healthy, so he can gig with it. I'll have to get back with him. It's been a little bit since he dropped it off. You know, again, we've definitely got some scratchy pots, so we can rectify that. Scratchy there too. Yeah, so definitely some scratchy pots, but that's about it. That's about, you know, honestly, that's about all I can see wrong with it so far. We're not drawing excess current. I mean, I'll check the bias and everything and make sure that everything's okay, but I'm not even noticing any scratchiness due to bad tubes or anything, you know, or dirty sockets even. I mean, it's sounding pretty kick-ass here in this room, so yeah, I'll definitely go ahead and clean the pots, and I'll clean everything else too, the jacks and everything, but I think that might be all this thing needs. I'll get with the customer and see if he had any other complaints that I'm just not seeing, but yeah, this is going to be fairly routine, so, but at least we'll be able to see inside of a Vibrolux. Alright, so here we are inside of this thing, and like I said, I don't think there's really much that this thing is going to need. There are a few things I can see kind of right off the bat, though. This does still have the same original screen resistors, and those are often replaced just as a precaution, because those screen resistors right there, they reside right on the tube sockets, and so they do tend to heat up over time, making their fail rate somewhat high. And if they do fail, that can cause some bias runaway issues and take out some other stuff as well. The power cord is not original. It has been replaced. But the new cord was just tacked right onto this socket. This one has a cord cable that's running from the center here over to... It's running over to this point. This is the death cap right here. So it's being grounded over here with everything in the bias supply. A capacitor like this to ground is really not... it's not something that is considered good practice in today's world. So we do have the original bias capacitor over here, and these are routinely replaced as well. That bias resistor right there we may go ahead and replace also, and replace it with a metal film variety, and you know, that would just be just a more long-term solution, something that's not likely to fail. We do have one component right here that I can see that has been replaced. That is probably a bypass cap by the look of it for that stage. We also have a little capacitor right here. Looks like the value may have been changed. I mean, none of the tone capacitor, the tone stack capacitors or anything like that have been changed. This is all the original capacitors, all these blue ones, and all of these are original as well. So yeah, I think, well, we got a couple of replacements there. So those have been replaced, the electrolytics. So yeah, the electrolytics have been replaced, except for that one. That's the only one that hasn't been replaced on those electrolytics. I will flip it over and look under the doghouse and see what's going on under the doghouse. But all right, actually, before we turn this chassis over, let's go ahead and deal with a few things here that I know we're going to have to deal with anyway. Let's go ahead and replace this capacitor here. So we'll go ahead and clip that out. That'll give us a chance to check out some of our new tools that were sent to us the other day. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Beautiful. All right, anytime you're clipping out a capacitor like this, you want to always make note of which end was the positive end, and the positive end was facing this way. And we also have a 70 microfarad, 100 volts. Okay, we're going to replace this with a 100 microfarad, 100 volt capacitor, and that should be just fine. Okay, other thing we want to go ahead and replace is that resistor right there, probably. The thing is, it's a carbon resistor, and you know, those tend to get brittle over time. They tend to crack internally, especially if they've been exposed to any heat at all, and it's just not really worth the risk. We're going to replace it with a better resistor. All right, before we really go any further with this, let's take a look at the schematic here, just to get a feel for what's going on in this amplifier. Here we can see this thing originally came with a 3-prong cord on it, which is what we already suspected. And here's the reason why you don't really like this configuration on the primary side of a power transformer. Because this .047 capacitor right here provides a path to ground, and if you switch this switch right here, you can see this switch can go either way. So you could have the hot side tied to ground through this capacitor, or you could have the neutral side tied to ground through the capacitor, just depending on which way you had this flopped. Like if, for instance, if the ground wire wasn't there, you know, you could conceivably turn it the other way and you know, make it the wrong polarity. Or, you know, the house could, if it's old wiring in the house, it might be wired wrong and the polarity might be wrong on that. So, or you might just simply get more noise with one polarity over the other if you did not have it properly grounded and everything wasn't properly shielded and so forth. But this switch right here provides the potential to switch it one direction, and if this .047 600 volt capacitor were to somehow short, you know, it would provide a direct path to the chassis, which you know, you can probably imagine would be a bad situation. Now, what would normally happen is if your house wiring was proper, it would just throw the breaker in your house, or it would blow this, well, might blow the fuse, but more likely it would throw the breaker in your house, because it would drive up it would drive up the current draw through the breaker box, and it would just throw that breaker of whatever circuit you were on, if that were to short. But the bottom line is, if you're holding on to your guitar strings, you're also holding on to the amp chassis, because your guitar strings are tied also to the amp's chassis when you play guitar. So, you know, you can obviously see that that might not be the best possible scenario for you to be grabbing onto something that's live. So, you know, this is not really the way things are done now with this capacitor to ground like this. This is called the death capacitor. So usually what happens is we clip these out, and also the switches that they're tied to, we just bypass those completely and don't use them. Another thing is the AC switch. You'll notice that the AC switch is on this side, tied to this prong of the power cord, and then it goes through this side of the transformer. Out the other side we have a fuse. Well, generally what is accepted practice now is that you take your fuse and your switch and you put both of those on one side in series. So you put them on the hot side. So the hot side that comes in will go first through the fuse, and then it will go through the switch, and then through the transformer. So the thing is, when you have the AC switch in the off position, it still does not allow anything through the transformer, but you also have a fuse in front of the switch. So if the switch were to somehow get shorted internally to ground, you would have a fuse here still that would blow and stop, you know, any current from continuing. If you had a problem in the transformer, you know, you have this circuit here and the fuse should blow, but if the fuse blows and you had a short in the inside the transformer or inside the switch to ground to the chassis, the current would still flow through that. It would flow from your hot to ground. So you would, even though your fuse blew, you would still have current being, you know, flowing through this. And if you're the type of person who is an idiot and you just, you know, shove a piece of steel or something in the breaker box in your house, you know, and that's not properly you know, fused, then you could have a major problem, and you could have a fire on your hands really quickly. So that's not, you know, this is no longer accepted practice either, to put your fuse and your switch on opposite sides of the transformer like this. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and rewire this primary side of the transformer and just bring it up to a little bit more modern standards. Now on the bias circuit, we've already replaced this component. This is the bias capacitor. You can see here positive is to ground. It's because the bias is a negative supply. So this side will have negative voltage on it. We have the negative of the diode here also on the negative side, positive to ground, or, you know, not to ground, excuse me, but to the supply side over here on this side. So, and we also have this 1K resistor right here. Now this 1K resistor, you can see what would happen if this 1K resistor right here were to burn itself open. You would lose all bias supply. This supply here would quickly drop to 0. And or it would actually go up to 0 from negative whatever it needs to be all the way up to 0, and that would throw the bias of the amplifier off. You would very quickly probably start to red plate your output tubes, and that could cause all sorts of meltdowns and all sorts of problems. So we don't want that. We want to avoid that at all costs. So we want to replace this 1K resistor right here to ensure that the bias supply stays stable at all times. This 3.3K resistor right here, we may also replace it. I haven't looked at it yet, but it's probably still the original one also. We have another capacitor here that we're showing on this schematic. Man, let me see if I can find it in the... I don't think that capacitor is actually in this model. So yeah, I don't think this is the exact schematic for this particular, you know, this particular example of the amp. This schematic's dated 1968, and it's a AA270. Now we have an AA270, we have an AA964, and we have an AB568. Okay, so we have this one here. The AB568 does not have that capacitor right there. Right there. There's no capacitor in that spot. So that's warmer. We do not show a ground on this. So that, you know, this is one of the earlier ones. This is you know, from this should be from 1968, this one. This one's even earlier than that. This has still got the GZ34, so this one isn't really right either. Either this is a transitional model or they don't have all of the Vibrolux Reverb schematics. I'm not really sure on it. But the AA270 is definitely the closest, but it just shows this additional capacitor that we need to ignore. There may be some other differences as well. But what we're looking at essentially, and most of this, the rest of this, the preamp and everything should be about the same. We're looking at, on the normal channel, goes to a half of a 7025. Then over into the tone stack, which has pretty much all the standard Fender values, 0.047, a 0.1, and a 250 picofarad. We've got a 6800 fixed resistor, a 250K, and a 250K into a 1 meg volume. We have a bright cap with a bright switch right here on this stage. Right here, this should be where the trim is being injected, I would say. Oh, no, okay. I see what they've done here. They've just tied the cathodes of these two tubes together so they share resistor and capacitor, and they all get mixed right here, which is also the point at which the trim gets injected. The oscillator gets injected right here. So yeah, there's actually, you know, one extra gain stage on the vibrato channel. So you have 1, 2, and then this third gain stage right here for the vibrato before it gets mixed in. So the normal is going to be a cleaner channel than your vibrato channel. And plus, because they're out of phase, this also means the two channels cannot be jumpered on this model. And then, of course, you have a 12-8 AT7 for the phase inversion. All very standard Fender-y kind of stuff. Okay, so here, if you scroll down, I didn't notice this before, but if you scroll down on this schematic, there's actually another schematic on this website here, and it's a different one, but it's very similar. And this one's labeled as Fender, Rogers, Rhodes down here at the bottom, but this one actually has all these changes, and you can see what I'm talking about. Here's our 3-prong receptacle. Here is our 3-position ground switch with the nothing position in the middle, and then over here you can see where they actually have done what I said we should do, which is they put a slow blow fuse. They also put, in this one, they put a thermal protector in line here, and then after that, it goes to an AC switch. So, you know, you can see here what I was talking about, where you put the fuse before the switch on one side of the transformer. So they've actually done it in a more modern way on this version of the amplifier than we saw up here in this schematic. Okay, so we're going to replace this 1K resistor here, which is it's a carbon resistor. And we're going to replace it with actually overkill. We're going to use a 2-watt metal resistor in that position. If this resistor were to somehow bite the dust on you, that would be a big problem. So as far as I'm concerned, that's much better. These two components, I would have to say, are going to be more reliable long term. So this amp will be less likely to fail. You know, it's probably just fine, but we're just going to go ahead and change this electrolytic capacitor. I think this is like a 5 microfarad or something small. They probably did not have the value on hand. That's why they didn't bother changing it when they did the rest of the work. But I'm going to go ahead and change it. I do have the value on hand, so we'll go ahead and do that. Look at the difference in size on the modern components as opposed to these older ones. Here's the one that's going in it. Just look at the size difference. Okay, so there's that one. Let's go ahead and do these screen resistors over here. Alright, so there are those completed, and the thing about going ahead and replacing these also is that you can get the new components like further up off of the socket, because the original ones are right down on the socket, and they're also right down on those grid stopping resistors right there. So you know, it's kind of transferring heat into those in a way as well. Now they're on top of them, so it's not that bad, but I mean, they're literally right down on top of them. But in the original configuration, the way they wire them from the factory, they're usually right down on top of that resistor down there. So getting them up off of that resistor, getting them up away from the socket is just a better way to go. All right, let's go ahead and set about rectifying the issues of the power and put everything in line and get that all sorted out. So the first thing we want to do, let's see, actually, looks like it might already be in series. Yeah, this one's already in series. So really, all we really need to do is clip out the death cap. And to be fair, we don't necessarily have to do that, but that is something I'm going to do. There's no reason to have the death cap. We have a, you know, it's polarized. I mean, even though you can turn this off, we don't want people really turning it into the on position. It's unnecessary. As long as you have proper wiring wherever it is that you are, wherever you're playing, it's not going to matter. We'll just clip this out, this wire, and we'll clip it over here as well, so make sure it doesn't get into anything else. And we can leave everything. We just want to clip the wire out. So there's that. Probably could go ahead and check the bias while we're here, but let's go ahead and flip this thing over though and check under the doghouse and see what the situation's like under there. I anticipate it probably being fine. And also we can go ahead and see what the we can go ahead and see what kind of tubes and everything they're rocking here. Alright, JJ6L6 GCs. We've got a Electro Harmonix 5U4. We could change that to a GZ34. That would definitely actually be a good upgrade for this amp. Let's see what we have here. Well, that's interesting. Okay, that's interesting as well. This output transformer has been replaced. This is not the original output transformer. You can see, yeah, this has actually 50th week of 2011. So this has been serviced not all that long ago. And this OT was replaced during the service. This is original. This one is original. But interestingly, on this one, I don't think I've seen anything like that before. But there's a, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it at this angle. But we have a 606 right here. And then we have 3 digits that have been X'd out, which is strange. You can see like XXX. So there was something stamped there, but then they came back and stamped X's over those 3 digits. And then maybe they just screwed up the 3 digits and they wanted to correct them. So this is a 039. So that would be, God, just considering, this one's 018. Do you know what? Considering all things here, this is probably 1980. I believe this thing must be from 1980. Did they make this model that late into 1980? Because the thing is, the logo on the front, once again, unless it's been replaced, it could have been replaced very easily. The logo is either not correct or is from a later run, and somewhat confusing. So this one is also original. You can see a 606 on this as well. So that's a Schumacher. This one's is that 104? So that might be, this might be 1971 actually. Yeah, it's got to be 71, and then we've got 1970, and then this one's replaced 2011 or 2012ish. It's probably when it was put in. So yeah. And yeah, sure enough, these are all replaced. That's actually a 12AX7 rather than a 7025. So that's a 12AX7. That's a Mesa tube. Mesa labeled Sovtech. This one's a JJ 81, so that's a AT. I mean, I realize set 12AX7 and 7025 are interchangeable, but the 7025 is lower noise. That's an older AT right there on the phase inverter. You know, obviously a lot of work has been done on this thing, and somebody replaced all the tubes at one point. Let's open this up. Now, of course, anytime you open up a dog house, you want to just beware that, oh, no, they have not been changed. Those are still the original caps. I did not expect that. With all the changes that have been made in this thing and all this, and the service that had been done in the past, someone didn't even come in here and redo the caps. So that's unusual. For an amp of this age, for somebody just to ignore the power capacitors is definitely unusual. I would have expected more from Uncle Sam's Jams, if I'm honest, because you know, this, if this belonged to this customer at the time that it went to them, then I can't imagine why they wouldn't talk him into just going ahead and replacing those, because that's very standard on something of this age. That's super standard, and that needs to be done. So it's gonna drive up the cost of this repair that's not already done. But these need to come out of there. These are better than some of the ones that you will see. These ones in this kind of aluminum casing, but still, man, they're not. This is not something we want to leave in here. So these are coming out post haste. I did text the customer a little bit earlier as well, just to double check what it was that he needed done on this, and he said what it was doing was it was kind of acting up. That was his words, acting up at high temperatures. Whenever it heats up, it kind of starts acting up, he said. So I guess there's probably some noise, most likely related to some tubes, perhaps, something like that. So we'll check that when we're done with all of this. Fire it up and kind of play on it for a little while, let it heat up, and see if there are any tube issues that we need to address. Now, and obviously that Mesa tube right there, well, not necessarily obviously, but it is an older tube. And then whatever this thing is in the V1 position, it's a Mesa as well. It's a yeah, I don't know. We could probably do a little bit better than that, perhaps. But we'll check them and see if they're all right. They might be fine. I don't know. I could be wrong. 230. Let's see. This is definitely the EIA code right here. 235. 80 is 1980. 33rd week of 1980, and all of these are 33rd week of 1980. So, okay. And yeah, the early 70s wouldn't have used this type anyway, I don't think. I think this is right for 1980. So interesting. This is a 1980, or rather, excuse me, it'd be 81. This is a 1981 amplifier. 1981 Silverface. I'll be damned. All right, now when you're doing like this, if you want to speed things up, you can measure and chop the first one first. And what I like to do is kind of line it up and chop like at the end of the board, on both ends, and then you can come back and you can chop them all the same way. Just line them up with the one that you just did, and it just speeds things along. So you can kind of line them up and then take the same amount, off of both ends, and it just makes everything easier. Okay, so there are those. There's the power supply all rewired. After you've done something like this, you want to make sure, you want to kind of go back and look at all these wires. You want to make sure that you haven't, like, for instance, melted this wire to you know, this lead or something silly like that, so you've got a short going on. You want to make sure that you tuck this wire up on top, for instance, so that it doesn't get smashed down on the doghouse and short. Same with this little wire here and these two. You just want to make sure everything is tucked out of the way. You haven't burned anything. You haven't, you know, done anything to short anything at all, or that, you know, nothing's loose as well. This old weather strip right here basically is kind of what this is. This old piece of foam. It actually sat down on top of those components, but now there's going to be space because these are much smaller. So what we're going to do, I'm just actually going to drop in a couple of dabs of silicone on each one of these to kind of just sort of keep it, you know, matted down so they just don't rattle. Alright, so that's good enough. That's just enough to kind of keep each one of these tacked down whenever that cures. Okay, while we're on the underside of the chassis here as well, I'm going to go ahead and spray clean these sockets. Okay, so there are those replaced. Those sockets are cleaned. So we're going to use a different cleaner for these. I'm also going to go ahead and clean this bias pot while we're in here. Put it back roughly where it was, because we're gonna adjust it anyway. So okay, so there's everything, I think, pretty much done. So let's test it out. We'll check the bias and adjust it if need be, and yeah, I think we're just about ready to go with this. Okay, we got this thing hooked up to the speakers. It's on. Let's plug it in, dial it up on the variac, and check the bias on these output tubes. The schematic calls for negative 48 volts. Okay, well that doesn't sound too great. Something's not right, obviously. Something's definitely not right there, because it was drawing a lot of wattage. So what's up with that? Well, something is certainly not right. I've done something, knocked something loose perhaps. I don't know for sure. Let's see what we've done here. Like I said, it was drawing some wattage, some excess current that it was not drawing before, so I'm thinking it's got to be something under the doghouse. Let's see what's going on. I think I want to try that again, but I want to measure at various points under here and just see what's going on with the power supply. So let's dial it up again. We're drawing 70 watts and we're only putting 77 volts into this thing. That's not right. 165 volts right there. That can't be right either. Well, at the first note we got 170 volts. That can't possibly be right. So what's going on? What could possibly be going on with that? Let me double check some things here. Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine what could possibly be going on with this, because I really didn't do much to it. One thing I did notice is that I did not see any, when I dialed it up, I didn't see any bias voltage at this point, and I should have saw bias voltage right there. I did not check over here on this side though. I'm wondering if when I clean this pot, if I messed it up. That's a possibility. Okay, this is definitely odd. You can see this reading right here that's jumping around, 14 ohms. That is being read from from the negative side of this capacitor, which is the bias capacitor, to the ground point. So essentially I'm just reading across the entirety of this pot, and it'll jump around from, like, I mean, that should be rock solid for one thing, but it's jumping around from, like, I don't know, 23K down to a dead short, depending on where I put this. And I can even just kind of press down on the control here and watch this number just move around. That shouldn't move around at all. I don't know how anything that I did caused that to happen, but all I did was spray it. I'm going to spray it again and see if I can't work whatever crap that is out of it. It stopped now. Sprayed it a couple times and I've worked it back and forth, and it's staying at like 23K now. See, so I mean, what I'm saying is here, essentially, I'm just going from, like, you know, I'm going from one side of this pot to the other side of the pot. I'm not even using the wiper, and look at this. It's just jumping around all over the damn place. What the hell? See, I'm just touching the chassis right there, and it's jumping around. I wonder if there's a bad ground between, like, the chassis and that pot. All right, so I just had something interesting happen off camera. I was trying to find the bias voltage because there was none. It was just reading 0. So I was measuring from, you know, this point right here to ground to the chassis. Okay, and you should see, you know, whatever the bias voltage is supposed to be right there, 40 something, negative 40 something volts, and I was reading like nothing. It was very, very small voltage, tiny. And so what I did was I just grabbed this and I kind of lifted up the whole board a little bit, like slightly, and I heard a little bit of a pop, and then something happened, and then I looked up at my fluke, and it was measuring, you know, like negative 30 something odd volts. Of course, I did not have it dialed up all the way on the Variac, so it's probably about right. But yeah, so something is getting shorted underneath here. That's not needed. We can get rid of that. Okay, well, I don't see where it's punctured through or anything like that. So I mean, it's possible. I'll tell you what's possible is when I sprayed the pot with cleaner, it's possible that the cleaner kind of leaked out and then ran down over here when I turned the chassis up and flipped it over, because the pot is right up here above it, and I don't know. I'm thinking maybe it's possible that you know, kind of ran down and caused some sort of I don't know, caused some sort of short. The liquid. That's a pretty good argument for why you should change one thing at a time when working on an amp. Okay, so we've got that back together. There's our bias voltage. Right there. Okay, so there definitely was some sort of short. I don't know what was exactly was happening, but something was happening. Alright guys, this video was already running on pretty long, so I've decided to go ahead and skip forward. Pretty much the only thing left to do was to bias the amp. So I biased the amp. It was actually a bit cold the way it was before, and I biased it up to about 15 or so watts per tube plate dissipation, which is still a bit low, but this thing is so loud it really doesn't need any more than that. So let's go ahead and give it a test. that'll do it for this 1980-81 Vibrolux Reverb Silverface, which is odd. I hope you guys have enjoyed this as much as I have, and for now, y'all take care.